Before we wrap up our thought experiment, let's consider one last scenario. Assume you've saved a child and you've gone back home happy. It was a proud moment in your life. The parents were grateful when you returned their child safely to them. And maybe they even told the local news about how altruistic you were. A few months pass, and one day, while surfing the internet, you come across an ad by a very reputable aid organization. The ad shows a child in a foreign country that is dying of a disease that is curable for the cost of roughly a new pair of shoes. By now, you see where we're going with this. Do you think that you should donate to cure the dying child? In this case, we empirically know that many people think the situation is morally distinct from the previous scenarios. But why? Let's review the common arguments. One might say that it is likely that many people are exposed to the ad, and they can act instead of us, or that there is a chance that the aid organization will not use the money appropriately. Though, is that meaningfully different from the scenario where we were at a pond and were uncertain whether we would be able to make a difference, either because other people may act and get to the child before us, or because we would be unable to get to the child on time? In the case of the pond, many agreed that some uncertainty is tolerated. So if the level of uncertainty is hypothetically similar, should our judgment be different here? Some might argue that in the internet situation, we do not need to save the child since they are from a different nation, or because we have already donated to a different charity in the past, so we've already helped others, or since donating won't solve the full problem at hand and would only help this one particular child that suffers from a disease. Yet, for many of us, such considerations did not prevent us from taking action before, when many were thinking that we should rescue the child, whatever their nationality is, regardless of whether we had already helped a different drowning child in the past, or even if we won't solve the problem of drowning completely. In other words, if these considerations did not change our mind in the pond scenarios, it seems like they should not change our mind here, at least if we want to be morally consistent. It therefore seems a potential core distinction between the pond and the internet scenarios is whether the child is physically close or remote. But is that a morally relevant distinction? This is somewhat arbitrary, and it proposes that if someone is remote, we may have less of an obligation to them, which is very odd. It suggests that if a family member of ours is suffering during their vacation abroad, we have less of an obligation to help them. We can continue the discussion for hours, and I'm certain that you have many more arguments and counter-arguments on the different scenarios and their conclusions. We left more materials and criticism in the notes if you want to dive deeper. The most important part is that this thought experiment allows us to reflect on moral obligations. Who should we help? And at which cost? Some philosophers believe that there is no meaningful moral distinction between a child that is drowning in front of us and a child that is dying of a disease far away. That conclusion is quite significant, because as we've seen in previous lessons, we have promising interventions that can reliably save the lives of others at a relatively small sacrifice to ourselves. So accepting this conclusion could imply that we should change our decision-making on what's the right thing to do.